So on today's episode, we're going to talk about how to intentionally capitalize your direct-to-consumer e-commerce business. It's a great episode you don't want to miss, so do stay tuned. Hi guys, hi everybody. Welcome to the 2x e-commerce podcast show. The interview you're about to listen to is an interview I had with Andrew D. Souza, who's the co-founder and CEO of Clearbanc, the world's largest e-commerce investor. Now, I came across this company, Clearbanc, just about 6 months ago from a Facebook ad, and I reached out to our Facebook group, to the e-commerce growth accelerator Facebook group, to ask people if they, knew anything about the company, and there was a resounding yes. So some people knew about it, and I exchanged a few DMs about the company, and I just wanted to get them on the show. Now, this episode has been 6 months in the making, and one of the reasons is because they've made a massive foray into the UK, where I'm based, and EU. Essentially, this podcast, I took lots of notes. So if you're on my YouTube channel, you'd see these are all the notes I took over the podcast. So I took 3 pages of notes because Andrew is a very, very clever and financially literate individual in this space of e-commerce, and we went through a lot in this interview, from cash conversion cycles to working capital to how to de-risk capital, where to put investment, equity into a business, and when to use actual capital to fund inventory or advertising, where his company actually comes to play. So all in all, if you're thinking about capitalization, just thinking about, how to essentially, just raise capital in a very efficient way for your e-commerce business, this is the episode to listen to. He's amazing. And I think the favorite part I love about this interview was when we went over the 0 to 100 million case study, and he gave a very good example of I think it was a Canadian-based e-commerce business that sold mattresses, and he talked about how they utilized not just digital, but digital and traditional, and why you need the analytical mindset for digital advertising from a direct response standpoint, and you still need the emotional connection of brand, like a brand driven campaign, and I found that really insightful and interesting. As I said, Andrew is a very clever individual. His company has invested over $1 billion in over 2,800 e-commerce businesses, and they utilize data science to actually figure out who to invest in. But interestingly, the bar isn't that high in terms of what they look into from my conversation with him. Anyway, I'm not going to babble too much. If you haven't already, if you listen to this podcast on iTunes, or you watch it on YouTube, please give us a follow, and on iTunes, give us a review. However positive or negative your experience is, I would love to see a review to help us, rise up the rankings. Another thing is, join our Facebook group. Just search for 2x e-commerce on Facebook, and I will catch you on the other side. Cheers. Welcome to the 2x e-commerce podcast show, and I'm your host, Kunle Campbell. This is the podcast dedicated to rapid growth in online retail and the direct-to-consumer selling space. So if you work in marketing at an e-commerce business or a founder, I'm going to help you sell more directly to your customers. Now, the way I do it is that every week I interview an expert, a founder at a direct-to-consumer e-commerce business, or a representative from a best-in-class e-commerce SaaS platform. We're focused in helping you, listeners, grow metrics such as conversions, average order value, repeat customers, your audience size, and ultimately sales. Speaking of which, on today's episode, this one is, this is a special one because I have been wanting to, the moment the adverts of this company popped up on my Facebook, I went to the Facebook group, to our Facebook group, the e-commerce growth accelerator group, and I asked, members if they knew about the company, and people had a lot of good things to say. Anyway, to cut the long story short, this is Clearbanc. I'm here with a co-founder of Clearbanc. His name is Andrew De Souza, and they're world largest e-commerce investor. They've invested over $1 billion in over 2,800 e-commerce businesses in the US, in North America, and in Europe. They're high growth. They just fund high growth opportunities. And I love what Andrew just said. They fund anything that's repeatable and scalable. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Andrew to the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Kunle. Very, very excited to be here. And thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Okay, let's start out with you guys, with Clearbanc. I probably haven't done you sufficient justice introducing Clearbanc. Could you whittle down your value prop in the next minute or two?
Yeah, absolutely. So we exist to help founders win, help e-commerce and direct consumer founders win. The way we do that is we unlock capital for repeatable, scalable growth. Things like advertising, things like inventory and infrastructure, shipping, parts of your business where you invest $1 and you make more than $1 out of it over a fixed period of time. I've spent a lot of my career as an entrepreneur raising capital. I'd say I spent half my time raising capital and half my time spending money. And I think I've realized that the process of raising equity capital, giving up ownership and control, taking that dilution becomes a very expensive and very time-consuming process for a lot of founders. And so you want to use that equity capital very judiciously to fund things that may not be repeatable and scalable. Things like R&D and product development, and things that you put $1 in and you may get $10, you might get 0 out. But for things where you put $1 in and you get 2, Clearbanc exists to help you just put your foot on the gas and continue to grow.
Okay, so this makes sense. So I let's say I invent something. I invent the best mobile phone case. You're saying that I invest my money or other people's money into developing it, and then once I find product market fit through advertising and I see there's a response, I come to you guys to further fund it to grow.
Exactly. We'll come in, we'll look at your data instantly. We can make you an offer and we can basically say, look, we think you should be spending X amount of dollars on marketing, X amount of dollars on inventory. We can continue to grow your business and free up that cash flow so that you can just focus on creating a great customer experience, creating great products, and not having to raise money or manage sort of the cash flows of that business.
So the 2 core areas are marketing and then inventory, bringing in the products and then selling the products. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, you talked about half of your career being, raising capital and spending capital. Could you just give us a bit of a background of what you did prior to Clearbanc?
Sure, yeah. So I am an engineer by training, grew up in Canada, and then spent a couple of years working at McKinsey, realized that the consulting world was not for me. Moved out to Silicon Valley, actually got recruited over by a guy named Chamath, who is maybe a bit notorious. He was head of growth at Facebook pre-IPO. And he started a company called Top Prospect, which was a recruiting company. It effectively was using LinkedIn and Facebook to help companies make better hiring decisions and better referrals. And so that was my introduction as an outsider, as a Canadian, to Silicon Valley, to see how this whole place worked. And we had great, Andreessen Horowitz and Spark Capital and a bunch of fantastic investors. And I think what I realized was all of the, I met the founders of Instagram, and I met the founders of Slack and Dropbox and all these companies that I would read about. I met them in Silicon Valley. And what struck me was there was nothing different about them than my friends back in Waterloo or my friends, overseas that were starting businesses, other than the fact that they happened to live down the street from the VCs who were investing in their companies and the journalists at TechCrunch that were writing about when the VCs invested. And so, I think, and then, I think that was what initially opened my eyes to this idea that, why do you have to know the person who manages the money why do you have to go out for drinks with that person? Why do you have to have the uncle that works at the investment bank? Like, all of those things make no sense. If I have a product that the market wants, why can't I just be able to go scale that based on, the evidence that I can show? And I saw this over and over again. And so, I'd gotten recruited to an education tech company, and, a big part of the reason they wanted me was because I had spent time in Silicon Valley and I knew a bunch of investors and I could help them raise money. I did that with a hardware tech company, and I got to know the challenges of managing the real pain.
Yeah.
My last hardware company was, we raised all this equity and 80% of it was tied up in our inventory, in our supply chain and working capital. And so then we gave up control and ownership of the business, and we had these investors that want to take the company in a different direction. They changed out the management team. It was very, very painful. But so I've experienced sort of the dimensions of, how much time it takes to raise that equity capital and how precious it is. And then the downsides of having, giving up ownership and control of your business, before you're ready to. So, I think that was a big part of the motivation around starting Clearbanc.
And you have 3 or 4 other co-founders of Clearbanc?
Yeah, there's 5 of us,
5, okay.
and yeah, so there's 5 of us that were around since the beginning, or kind of since the very early days, and have been sort of instrumental in the growth of the business. My partner, actually, Michelle, so my personal life partner as well as business partner, was one of my co-founders, and it's interesting. So she bootstrapped her first 4 businesses. She sold her last company to Groupon in 2014. Okay. And then she's been on Dragon's Den in Canada, which is Shark Tank of Canada. Okay. So she's been an investor on that show for the last 6 seasons. Cool. And so we would see these entrepreneurs from across the country come in, and it was that same story. It was, okay, I've got, it was literally the iPhone case was one. Developed this iPhone case, and we do this custom woodworking in the middle of Canada, and it's a family business. And now we want to give up 50% of our company for $100,000, right? And it's just like,
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Doesn't make any sense, because they'd already figured it out. They had customers, they had online marketing campaigns that were working. They knew how much it cost to produce the product, and so we were like, why don't we just restructure this deal where you just give us a percentage of revenue until we make our money back, and then you just keep your company, and we'll just continue to keep you funded as you go.
And I think that's a very important point. We discussed this prior to this interview. We talked about debt financing, and you're like, no, we're not debt financing. We're a partnership. We're taking a percentage of spend, and then it just works. So the existence of that business going forward, is mutually beneficial to both the company and yourselves. It's a very important distinction that, going to a bank and getting a lump sum of money, and then, if anything happens, they come and take your assets.
Well, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. I think, we've seen sort of on the equity side, you give up a portion of your business, and the equity investors need you to sell your business for them to make their money back, right? So they're pushing you to grow and grow and grow, and then sell, right? Or die trying. On the debt side, what the banks are really focused on is just downside mitigation. So, okay, how do I value this business? And if this business fails, or if they miss a payment, or if they can't actually make the payment, can I take it over and sell it for parts to at least recover my investment? That's all they care about, right? And so, and often that comes with a personal guarantee. So they go in and say, okay, I don't really understand the business, but does the founder own their home, right? Do they have any assets? Okay, great. If they have, if they own their home, then I will give them a loan. And if the worst case scenario, the business fails, I'll go after the founder for his personal assets. That's the way that most deals are structured on the debt side. So we're very, very different. I would say we're sort of in between, right? So what we want to be, equity-like in the fact that we let you offload risk, right? We basically say, look, we're going to sit in this with you. We'll bring you $100,000, and we will take 5% of sales until we get 106 back. And we'll do that every month, right? So you just continue to do that, or you can do it, and then in 6 months you've paid us back, and then we'll give you another 100. You can structure it however you want, but the idea is we want to keep your marketing and your inventory budget fully funded, and we just get paid back as those products sell. Right. And then our fees are effectively 6%. So you're never going to pay us more than 6% more than we've given you.
And what about the time frame for payment?
It depends on the scale and stage of the business. Between 6 and 12 months is the duration of when we get paid back. But look, sometimes we're wrong, right? Sometimes the companies revenue is looking like it's growing really quickly, and then it ends up tapering off, and so it takes more than 12 months. Sometimes we're wrong the other way. Sometimes we fund a company, they invest in a marketing campaign, it takes off, and then they pay us back in 4 months. But they've got a business that's twice the size as it was when we first invested. Exactly, and they've only paid us that 6%.
And then it's all tech-driven risk profiling. You plug in via APIs to their Shopify, to their Facebook advertising platforms, to their inventory. You get a picture, a 360 view of their business, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it takes a few minutes to sign up. You just connect your online accounts, and then we can give you an offer instantly, and you can see what your options are. And one of the interesting things we found is that's actually taken a lot of the bias out of the investment, because traditionally, and whether you're going to a bank or whether you're going to a VC, you're off. It's the VC passes their own personal judgment on your business and your business model. And so, we fund. We're really proud of the stat. We fund 8 times more women than the venture capital average, because we fund lots of companies that are focused on women's health, right, and like women's issues and things like that. And if most VCs are men and most bankers are men, they don't understand those problems. And so then if they don't understand the problem, they're just never going to give you that credit for it. And so all we care about is, have you built a product that customers want, right? We don't need to understand the product. You don't need to talk to somebody to convince them that there is a real market. If the data shows that there's a market, we can unlock the capital so you can scale. So
from a maturity standpoint, from a business maturity standpoint, what are you looking at? Where's the starting point when you start to say, okay, there's consideration here?
So it's companies that are at above a $10,000 monthly run rate. That's kind of when we've typically found that's when they've found product market fit. So they've been in business for 6 months. They're doing on track to do more than $10,000 a month, and they're growing steadily. Then we think, okay, you're onto something. That's also the time when in most cases in the D2C world, it's moved from a part-time sort of side gig to, okay, I think there's a path for me to make a living, right? And so that's often where we get involved, is founders who are saying, hey, I've been running this off the side of my desk. Now it's looking like it's making 8-10 grand a month. I think we can improve the margins and all of that stuff. I think I can, if I can scale that, I could actually make a living off it. And that's when we will typically get involved.
And then there's the juggle of, inventory and sales, managing, the lead times to get your inventory, especially if it's offshore, where manufacturing is offshore, you're trying to bring it. It takes a 3-month lead time because it's cheaper sometimes. Even if it's air freight, sometimes it take like 45 days to manufacture. And then, air freight will get it in within like a 60-day time frame. You have all of that to juggle from an inventory standpoint, where they make many e-commerce, many starting retailers make money, but there's nothing left because it has to go back to I'm getting stock in the next 6 months. So
exactly,
very tough.
And this is why we're really excited. And we heard this feedback, exactly that story of, okay, my inventory is on the water, but I'm missing the opportunity to go out, or I'm selling out of products, and I've got to wait till my cash conversion cycle, so I can buy more. And so we're really excited. We launched an inventory product just over a month ago. And effectively what we'll do is we will purchase your inventory from overseas or domestic, wherever, on your behalf. And then you only pay us back as that inventory sells. So however long that takes for the inventory to sort of work it.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. Klaviyo is a growth marketing platform that powers over 25,000 online businesses. Klaviyo understands every single customer interaction and empowers brands to create more personalized marketing moments. Listen, analyze, and act on your customer data with Klaviyo. Visit klaviyo.com/2x.
Its way through the system, you pay us back, and it's the same thing, right? If it costs you $10 per unit, you pay us $10.60. It's like 106, right? If it costs you $1 per unit, you pay us 106 back every time that unit sells. And so that has allowed us to really de-risk that inventory purchase. And often what we find is, because we can bring the capital, the founders can either pay up front or make a larger inventory purchase with our help. And they offset that fee, because if you make a larger purchase and you pay up front, you can often get a discount on the inventory, and so you can offset or completely cover that 6% fee that we would charge.
Super interesting, because when I found out about you guys, it was like the value proposition at the time was fund your Facebook your ads, your ad spend. So it's great to see the expansion into inventory, because that's another major pain in running an e-commerce business.
Exactly. And that's what we think about. We want to use data to help make lives easier for e-commerce founders. And so, but I think there's one thing about just saying, here's a bunch of money, you figure it out, versus saying, okay, this is here's the cash flows of your inventory cycle. Here's the cash flows of your marketing program, actually designing and matching sort of your sources and uses of funds. And this is something that public company CFOs do, right? They think about, how do I finance my working capital versus my long-term investments versus my R&D versus my inventory? And they have bespoke financing solutions for each line item in their P&L. Most early stage founders don't have that, right? It's a lot of work to do. Nobody gets into this to optimize their capital structure or their capitalization. So we just want to make that very easy. We want to give early stage founders and e-commerce founders the same tools that a public company may have access to.
Fantastic. Okay. I'm just going to go off tangent here.
Sure.
Because some listeners are very ambitious in this show. Some people, and I've had some founders here who've passed $100 million dollar a year mark, or who wants to hit $100 million. Now, if you were to do it, I know you're on the other side, you're on the finance side. What formula would you take? Say you have you want to hit 5 million, you want to hit 100 million in the next 5 to 7 years of your life. It's a good chunk of your life from a revenue standpoint, profitably. How would you do it, given tools like Clearbanc, given equity, given banks, given Facebook credits, given Shopify, this ecosystem of capital, and obviously a great product or suite portfolio of products? How would you structure it from that?
Yeah, well, it's actually really interesting. A good friend of mine and our board member at Clearbanc is Raj Rupral, who's founder of Endy. He was head of Groupon International and Groupon Goods, and then he left and he started a mattress company in Canada called Endy. And they went from $0 to $100 million, 4 years, sold the company, no outside investment. And look, I think the way that they were able to do it was, I think you have to. I think you have to commit to this sort of omni-channel. Like, they were everywhere, right? Like, if I think through that, like they wrapped the streetcars and bus stops. They wrapped, they had the billboards. Then they took the online channels. They were on TV. They repurposed their TV ads for online. Like, they were not. I think that this is one of the areas where a lot of D2C founders think they can sort of thread the needle and optimize and optimize and optimize. And I'm just going to go on Facebook, and then once Facebook is perfect, then I like. For you to really get those benefits, you have to be omni-channel. You have to test constantly be testing and pushing the envelope, because the way that you sort of jump from, 1 million to 5 million to 10 million is you find those next, are you on Snapchat before everybody else is? Are you on TikTok before everybody else is? Are people seeing you on TikTok and purchasing on Instagram? Like, are you then out of home? Are you on the podcast? Like, all of that stuff, like, those are the opportunities. And so you need to be constantly testing and experimenting, these new channels, the combinations of different channels, targeting the same audience across their journey. And so that's where, it takes a level of aggressiveness and risk seeking that many D2C founders aren't willing to take. And that's where having access to capital, it lets you have way more shots on goal, right? We can come in and say, okay, if you had a marketing budget of 100 grand, you were planning on spending it all on Facebook, why don't we give you 400 grand and you spend 100 grand on Facebook, then some more on Google, some more on Pinterest, some more on Snap, some more on out of home, some more on podcasts, some more on an influencer strategy, and actually figure out what works, and then double down and adjust that media mix much, much more frequently. So that's what I've seen work well. But it does take a lot more guts than, I'm going to optimize one channel at a time.
It does. Yeah. And there's the attribution problem, and then there's the challenge of allocation, just allocation of budget, exactly what takes the chunk, the giant chunk? What's going to get that initial spread for the top of funnel to filter down? How do we,
Yeah.
resource allocation?
And I mean, attribution is always a challenge, and I haven't seen
Mm-hmm.
anybody do it perfectly at all. But I do think that if you think through media mix and you
Mm-hmm.
think through, it's almost like if you think about like wealth management, it's almost like you're managing your portfolio and you're constantly rebalancing your portfolio to optimize an outcome. You may not like people focus, I think, way too much on attribution and not nearly enough around media mix. And if you, I mean, like if you think back to like the Mad Men days and like, or like there was no hope of attribution, right? And so people got
Yeah.
very, very good at media mix, right? And they just looked at, okay, how much am I pouring in the top and how much is coming out of the bottom? And does the whole thing make sense?
Yeah.
And we've gone so far away from that in search of attribution that it's caused people to get less creative around the
Yeah.
media mix.
Yeah, yeah. There's a silver bullet mentality where this one channel is going to, do the magic essentially. And I like this
Exactly.
Mandela quote: "There's no passion to be found playing small, in settling for a
That's
life
right.
that is less than one you're capable of living." Just think big, really. Think big. Yeah,
Exactly.
a great example with regards to the ND mattress. Yeah, thank you, Okay, so there's Clearbanc in this funding ecosystem, and then there's I know of Shopify credits, I know of
Hmm.
Facebook ads credits. Um, for your best in class clients, customers, utilizing Clearbanc to the max and seeing the dividends off the back of their strategy and the right use of capital. How are they playing with other credit sources? Are they using other credit sources, or what would you advise? Would you use Clearbanc? I know it's a biased question, but you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
access to data,
Yeah.
and that's why I asked for the best in class. How are they utilizing, opportunity capital, access to capital across the
Yeah,
board?
no, we encourage our customers, if they do have access to different sources, I think it's just important for them to understand the what are the implications, like what are the uses of funds, right? And so, if you have, a low interest, credit card or something like that, how are you going to use that? What are the terms associated with it? But then also, it's not just sort of amount and cost of capital. There are you signing up for financial covenants, right? Are they encumbering the business? Are you signing up for a personal guarantee? It's really important for you to understand that, because if a lender or a bank is not taking any risk on you, then obviously, they're going to charge you a lower rate, because they know that, if things go sour, that they are going to take over the business, or they're going to come after your assets and things. And then in terms of, Facebook, Google, Pinterest, we've got great relationships across every advertising platform and channel. What we've seen sometimes has been, there are incentives sometimes that they'll offer for people that are, if you spend, if you've been spending, again, like $200,000 a month and you spend 300,000 for the rest of the quarter, then they'll give you some credits for that. We can help you achieve those, right? And so those are some of the areas
That's
where,
true.
they come in and they say, hey, Clearbanc, like, we have an opportunity. Facebook put this incentive in front of us. We think we can
Yeah.
capitalize on it. So we've definitely done that a few times as well.
Yeah.
So that's yeah. So
Clever.
we're, yeah.
That's clever.
It's the same version of, it's the same type of,
Arbitrage.
it's similar to the inventory thing, right?
Yeah.
If your supplier says, all right, well, if you purchase $500,000 worth of goods, we'll give you a 10% discount. Well, great, we can come up with that, right? Or we can help you bridge that gap. So those are the areas where you can use capital to your advantage to improve your margins effectively.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, you recently moved to the EU. How you're active? Were you always in the UK, or was it with your move to the EU? Was the UK included, or did you get into the UK first?
Yeah, so we started with the UK. We'd been doing a pilot. We put about £30 million into UK e-commerce
Okay.
businesses so far.
Okay.
We have plans to put another £500 million over the next 12 months.
Incredible.
And then certainly use that as a launching point to the rest of Europe. But yeah, we are. Look, I think if I go back to sort of my original story of spending time in Silicon Valley, I think as hard as it is for entrepreneurs to raise capital in Silicon Valley and in the US, it's just an order of magnitude harder everywhere else, right? And so if you're just a little bit removed from, and certainly if you're close to London, it's a little bit easier. 70% of the capital we put out in the UK is outside of the London area.
Wow.
And so,
Yeah,
it's a lot of founders that, that
Up
have
north.
great ideas and
Yeah.
see a lot of opportunity and potential, but may not be plugged into the banks and the
Exactly.
venture capital. And so that's a big part of our mission. Is we think entrepreneurial talent and ambition and drive exists everywhere. And so, but opportunity is not always equally allocated because access to funds is not always equally distributed. And we want to move the needle there, and make it much easier regardless of where you are.
How does the UK compare to the US from your initial, investments? What kind of businesses are you funding? It would be interesting to find to get your perspective thus far.
Yeah, it's not as different. I think what's happening is there is a UK, there's a European equivalent to most of the big direct to consumer brands that we find in the US. There's the equivalent in every country really. And I think from a investor and even from a founder standpoint, they may not want to go. And the UK is obviously a massive market, but I even look at this in Canada, for example. Building this is why Raj didn't raise outside money for Endy, because he didn't plan on building the brand outside of Canada. He was building a Canadian branded company. He knew the market opportunity and the market size, and he owned the whole thing. And so, I think there's a lot of people that are like, okay, well, I can actually build a product designed for my local market, my local sort of European market. I understand how to talk to them, and I understand how to design for them. I understand how to market and source and supply. But do I really want to go out and raise money and tell a multi-billion-dollar story of how I'm going to take over the global toothbrush industry or the global bed sheets? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, do you really want to do that, or do you want to build a great business for yourself and preserve some optionality? You can always still do that in the future, but if your real advantage is you understand your local market and you want to go and win that market with your product, then the venture capital story of an IPO or a multi-billion-dollar exit may not be the right path for you, and that's okay.
Yeah, true. Makes sense. But there's that local market dominance you strive for and you achieve eventually,
Exactly.
with good timing and the access to capital and doing the right thing, really.
And that's really where.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. Did you know that cloud-hosted e-commerce platforms like Shopify and BigCommerce do not provide automatic backups? Rewind steps in to protect Shopify and BigCommerce stores with automatic backups. Rewind is trusted by over 25,000 stores. Install Rewind and get to test it for free over 7 days. And to extend the 7-day trial to 30 days, head over to rewind.io, their website, and mention 2x eCommerce.
That strategy around media mix can really pay dividends, because then if you get the out of home, and you get the TV and the radio and the online and the direct mail, and you get all of this stuff, so that you're really building a brand, right? With this media mix, you can much more easily build that brand if you're targeting a geography than if you're trying to spread yourself super thin globally.
How do you build that? I know this is again outside of the scope of this interview, but how do you build that team? That superstar team that understands omni-channel marketing in the real sense of it. From direct to TV, radio, and digital. How do you get that coherence? I know a few brands that are doing this well. Where do you start? How do you start to get people to see beyond Facebook, beyond Google, beyond Facebook and Google, the giants in digital?
Yeah. I think it's been really, we've seen some great people that have come from traditional media sort of reinvent themselves for the D2C world. And we're increasingly seeing, hires that are coming out of, traditional media companies that are really struggling, or media agencies, but are moving into D2C. And they just understand sort of that brand marketing dimension that performance marketers and demand gen, they're really focused on the analytics, which is an incredibly important component, but are often sort of light on the brand side. So look, the perfect unicorn is somebody who can tell a brand story, but also can get deep in the analytics. often you need to have, a diversity of skill sets, because it's just very hard to find people that can live in the weeds and in the analytics, but that can also lift themselves up and tell the story in a cohesive way, and even more importantly, understand how that story needs to be conveyed through all those different media, right? Because sort of a long form looks very different than an online, mobile
Exactly.
focused thing looks very different than a pre-roll, looks very different than a podcast.
Yeah.
Like there's all of those different things that are it's a real challenge.
Yeah.
And so
Channel. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, channel specific stories. You're spot on. I've seen bigger CPG brands make the mistake of using TV format, the TV ads in Facebook.
right.
It just no connects there with audiences. If that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, makes sense. All right. So yeah, I really want to talk about trends. In e-commerce from a Clearbanc point of view. What's in the D2C space across the board? What trends what big trends are you seeing? What can you see beyond 2021? Where are we going as an industry in the direct to consumer space?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's old news now that COVID has accelerated e-commerce, across the board, right?
Hmm.
People that were never planning on buying anything online are now forced to.
Hmm.
I think what has probably seen the biggest increase in adoption has been things like consumables, right? People are buying their food and their groceries and their
Yeah.
toiletries and all of that stuff online, for the first time, and for a long duration, right? I think previously they were saying, okay, let me just go to the Costco or bulk store and stock up, and now they're realizing, okay, maybe if I sign up for a subscription, I can build a brand, I can try a new brand. So I think there's a huge opportunity
Are they
for
doing
people to.
this on Amazon or direct to consumer e-commerce stores like Shopify stores?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think certainly on Amazon, right? And
Mhm.
Amazon has done a lot, but I think for certain categories, um, Amazon is quite daunting for people, right? To be like,
Yeah.
okay, what do I, there's too many options,
Yeah.
and so I think there's a real opportunity for direct to consumer brands and founders to reshape consumer habits, because there's just this dislocation in consumer buying behaviors, and it's going to continue, right? It will continue as long as we are sort of working from home and in sort of some semblance of lockdown.
Yeah.
That you can actually dislodge the P&G equivalent in your category,
Yeah.
with a unique message, unique value proposition, targeted well, and it will take time,
Yeah.
but there's really for the first time an opportunity for, I think, direct consumer brands, and I think I'm particularly excited about consumables,
Hmm.
and I think the food and beverage and health is probably even more unique, because people will, like, if it's probably very hard to change people's razor blades or toothpaste, right? Like people
Yeah.
are going to do it, and you can certainly do that. And if you can win somebody, you've got a customer for a very long time, which is why
Hmm.
those companies invest a lot. Um, it's probably not that hard to get somebody to try a new snack, right? Like, or a new beverage or something like that. Beverages are maybe a bit harder on the shipping side, but like it's probably not as hard. So I think those are very interesting opportunity, or new dog food, right? Like those kind
Yeah.
of things. Like those are the types of things that we're seeing really. I think pet as a category is also very interesting, because a lot of people got
Mm.
pets. A lot of people who are stuck at home got their pets, and
Exactly.
now we're seeing an explosion in that category because people have pets, and now they want to feed them and play with them and make them healthy, and like toys and did beds and accessories and things. So we're seeing a huge boom in the pet category overall.
And what I'm picking from this is this subscription opportunity e-commerce is unlocking. CLV is going to be maximized. So the viewpoint of e-commerce initially was, where you'd buy your next monitor or your TV. They were one-off purchases for a large
Hmm.
part. And from what you're saying with pets, food and beverages, consumer packaged goods, and consumables in general, they're inherently things we buy regularly. And once you put it on auto on a subscription, you just, you get
Yeah.
it when there's that convenience bit, there.
Exactly. And I think, look, the real advantage of direct to consumer is that you establish a relationship with the consumer. So
Mm.
even if you're selling a, single SKU, big ticket product, I think it's almost your responsibility. I mean, it's your opportunity to establish a relationship with that consumer and figure out how you can continue to meet that consumer's needs, right?
Yep.
So even if you're selling a mattress online, what else do they need associated with, and then it's the product line extensions, and it's the, like, why did they buy your mattress? What are they looking for? Are they looking to enhance their sleep? Are they looking to, refurnish their home? Like, really understanding your customer, establishing a relationship, establishing a dialogue, and understanding, because mattress company could extend into furniture, or it could extend into, like sleep supplements, right? You could actually imagine, like, what is the reason that your customer is coming to you, and how do you establish that relationship, and how do you build a product roadmap so that you can actually leverage that that trusted customer base who has bought from you and loves your product to then continue to fulfill more and more of their needs.
Exactly.
And so I think that's one of the big opportunities, is turn every purchase, right? Even if you think of yourself as a transactional purchase, turn every purchase into a lifetime relationship with a customer, which is something that the traditional CPG never had the opportunity to do, right?
Because they're all selling through channels, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Supermarkets and all. Right. Oh, we're about to.
And Amazon doesn't always give you the opportunity. They're creating some, but Amazon still wants to sit in between, right? And just intermediate. So that's where the opportunity sits.
They take all the data from you. So
exactly.
So they strip it off completely.
Exactly.
And sometimes just create their products to rival yours. So wrapping up, do you fund Amazon businesses, or do you strictly fund direct to consumer e-commerce businesses?
Yeah, so we will fund all online businesses. We actually encourage companies to go omni-channel, right? I think it's like, it's important to be on Amazon, because there are going to be customers who find you on Amazon. And so you want to capture that inherent demand. But often what will happen is people will search something, they'll see your product on Amazon, then they'll Google you, they'll search your site, and they'll buy it from you directly. So there's all kinds of, like, it's important to be everywhere the customer is, right? I think that's basically our recommendation, is put your product everywhere your customer could be, and just try and establish that relationship with your brand out there. And so when we find Amazon only brands, we really encourage them to build a direct channel. When we find direct customers, we often encourage them, for the most part, to also be listed on Amazon, just to be able to build that awareness and customer base.
Okay, Andrew, I'm going to let you go, but before I let you go, I have a lightning round. I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and if you use a single sentence to answer each of them, it'd be brilliant.
Okay.
Okay, ready?
Let's try it.
Okay, fine. What advice would you give to yourself 5 years ago?
Don't overthink things.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
What 2 things can't you live without?
What can't I live without? My AirPods, and my notebook. My Clearbanc notebook is exactly.
So what book are you currently reading?
I just finished 1984. 1984. Which I have not read that in a long time. It feels very appropriate for the times we're in right now.
Very appropriate times. All right. What's been your best mistake to date? By that I mean a setback that's giving you the biggest feedback.
It was probably, we had a terrible board meeting for my last company, in which they basically wiped out the entire management team, and I found myself without a job. And then I realized I don't want to have to give up board control, and I, like, for inventory capital, really. And so that was a good learning moment.
Fascinating, and that led to what you're doing now, empowering so many businesses. Okay. So if you could choose a single book or resource that's made the highest impact on how you view building a business and growth, which would it be?
Oh, there's so many. I love Ray Dalio's principles, but I'm going to give one that's less obvious. There's a book called Lucky or Smart, by a guy named Bo Peabody, and it's like a 50-page book. It's a super short book.
Okay.
Sold his business in the tide of the .com boom, and it's very, very interesting. So I won't give away the whole book, but Lucky or Smart, Both You Buddies, a great one.
I'm on the Amazon right now. Okay, so Andrew, I have to say that this interview has got to be one of the most important interviews I've carried out in 2020. First of all, the way you just answered the questions, your vast knowledge, number one, just the expertise and the purpose of your business. Capital is very important, and where you guys are coming from, just well done. Thank you so much for making this interview.
Well, I appreciate that, Kunle. No, we're still on a mission to help more founders win and be successful. And so anytime we can, any insight or feedback we can give, we're more than happy to. Appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Okay, so for those of you listening, it's Clearbanc. That's CLEARBANC.com. Are you most active on any channels? For people who want to just follow what you guys are doing.
Yeah. You can follow me. I'm Andrew D'Souza on Twitter. We're just at Clearbanc on Twitter or Instagram.
Okay.
Or you can find me on LinkedIn and follow any other thoughts for sure.
You just got a follow from us. Okay, thank you so much, and
fantastic.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.